Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christy Hoskinson, and I'm excited to be your host today for our weekly executive web forum brought to you by Open Minds. I've actually come on the screen a minute early, seeing that our attendees are starting to come in to the virtual room. And in fact, I even see your names. Jean and Kathy, thank you for joining us. I can see that your audio is muted, and it will be muted for the entire webinar. So at this point, why don't you use the chat feature? If you want to just say hi, just get used to using that chat box. Maybe Jean and Kathy, maybe you can tell us where you're from, what city you were dialing in from in the chat feature in this GoToWebinar. Let's see if we can get that going. And you may be scrambling now because you were like, I was not expecting to type anything in at the top of this webinar in the chat feature, but it is something we're going to use in this webinar. So I wanted you to get used to it. If you don't mind finding that, it's in the usually top right-hand corner. I know it is for me when I pull up my GoToWebinar, and the chat feature is right on the bottom. And it looks like we have a question. All right, Jean, you put it in the questions, and Jean is from North Carolina. Is that correct? Thanks for putting it in there. And Jean said yes. So Jean's using the question feature, which is awesome. That's another way to put your question in. So Kathy, maybe you just left and you're coming back to your seat right now. But if you want to put where you're from, that would be a great way to start. And with that, we're actually sitting here at 1:01 on Thursday, January 28th. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just a couple of things. As I said, my name is Christy Hoskinson. My role at Open Minds is I'm the general manager for Circle, which is our online market intelligence community. And as part of today's weekly executive web forum, we're going to welcome two guests here in just a moment, John Evans and Lynn Mason, along with one of our senior associates, Tom Bass. And we're going to have a conversation around investment bankers, private equity, and venture capitalists, moving from a nonprofit world to private equity investment partnerships. Before we get started, just a couple things, Jean and Kathy, and for those of you who are listening to this webinar now on demand, as I mentioned, your audio is muted on this GoToWebinar, but we want you to stay involved. So use the question and or the chat box. I'm going to be monitoring it. Tom, our senior associate, is going to be asking Lynn and John questions, but we want you involved as well. In fact, we want you to be asking questions to these experts that we have on today's webinar. I'll be addressing them as we move along, so don't be shy. Use the question and or the chat feature. And another thing, the slides and the recording from today's session, they will be available on our Open Minds website. In fact, we'll have that up as early as tomorrow afternoon. And so with that, let's get started. I'd like to invite onto the screen now, John, Lynn, and Tom. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background about all three speakers today. And then I'm going to turn it over to John and then Lynn. They're going to share some information about their organizations. And then Tom's going to take it over and chat away with our guests. So John Evans brings 30 years of experience in the behavioral health field. He is the founder and currently the president and chief executive officer of innovaTel Telepsychiatry LLC. He brings noted expertise in the design of community-based programs, new service line development, telehealth-based service delivery, and has expertise working with private equity and venture capital investment in the behavioral health sector. Lynn Mason joined Broadstep in 2019 after holding numerous senior leadership positions in multi-site, multi-state organizations within primary care, acute and chronic services, hospitals, and pharmacy. Under Lynn's leadership, Broadstep is embarking upon a new vision to be the nation's first choice in IDD and behavioral health, offering the highest quality supportive living services and promising a place your heart calls home. And finally, but not least, Tom Bass brings over 20 years of experience in business growth strategies, investments, and market knowledge to Open Minds. Tom has an extensive experience in spearheading new initiatives that drive revenue growth, expand market share, and increase strategic advantage through partnerships, acquisitions, and financing. He currently serves as a senior associate with the Open Minds Consulting Practice. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an incredible field of experts here to have this conversation. And with that, I'd like to now turn it over to John Evans.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate the kind words, and want to start with thanking Monica and the whole Open Minds team for this opportunity. For the many years I've enjoyed both participating and presenting at Open Minds, and always find I come away with something of value. So appreciate the opportunity. We're going to move through the slides fairly efficiently because we want to leave a good amount of time for interaction here that Tom's going to lead us through. So if we could go to the first slide real quickly, just to give you some background as to why I'm here and how I got here. The majority of my career has been in the community mental health nonprofit sector, both hospital-based and independent clinic-based. I had the unique opportunity to be the first founding CEO of the first freestanding community mental health center in our region, which was a great experience. Had the opportunity to grow that over the years, and two of the many things on my list of what kept me awake at night was physician recruitment and retention, and am I going to be able to balance the budget at the end of the year? Many other things contributed to that, but those were the two of the top issues that I think are pretty similar to most community-based mental health centers. We had some unique experiences starting with a SAMHSA grant to do a kind of a small mental health grant program, gosh, almost 15 years ago now. And it was interesting, but a little challenging because the equipment, while it was very expensive at the time, was not particularly reliable. Would tile a lot, the sound wasn't particularly good, and it cost a lot of money. Things developed and a number of things happened, and over the years we continued to have challenges, recruitment and retention, and had the opportunity to do more of a full-time telepsychiatry opportunity within our clinic that actually worked quite well through some lessons we learned. And at the time I was president of the Pennsylvania Providers Association and was sharing our experience with colleagues, which led to a number of requests, so could we help them out? So in 2014, some colleagues and myself pooled our own finances and really decided we had to take that out of the nonprofit world and started innovaTel in 2014. And our mission has remained the same. Timely access to care wherever and whenever someone needs it is critical. We know that it is probably the most efficient path to the triple aim of timely access, lower costs, and better outcomes. So that is the mission we carried from the nonprofit sector to the for-profit sector. And we're really fortunate now to be in 18 states and over 70 clinics with a large number of clinicians that has really benefited for that timely access goal. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what we learned is it's a completely new environment. There's some similarities between the for-profit and nonprofit world, but there is really some uniqueness to it. I think most importantly, the language. I've lamented both to my colleagues and my wife, my language set has changed over the last few years from clinical assessment criteria to some definitions that we'll get to in a minute. Probably the most important thing I found was really choosing a partner once we got to really partnering with an investment firm. And it's not dissimilar from everything else you do in life, that you choose a partner that is a good match for you, culturally and otherwise. And we were fortunate to find that in our search. Also knowing what your funding requirements are, what you are going to do with that money, and how you're going to do it, how quickly, and how it's going to multiply over the years are some really critical items that you should really be aware of before you start talking with investment partners. And then, as I mentioned, the language is really quite different. I had no idea what an EBITDA was prior to going this. That's not a calculation we do in the nonprofit world, but it's actually earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Real critical number in the for-profit world, and a lot of attention paid to that. The issue of a multiple was also not something we talked about, but a multiple is actually quite simple. It's how much revenue is coming in every year, and how will that equate going forward, which leads to the valuation, which is what an investment group will really very distinctly try to determine as to whether or not they're going to partner with you. So they'll essentially take that number of your annualized revenue and then apply a multiple to that, which I have to say was really quite exciting because, again, not being in that world, when they started applying multiples of a certain number to our annualized revenue, the zeros started adding up in a nice way. However, that comes with a great deal of responsibility. If a firm is going to invest millions of dollars with you, they're going to want to know how that's going to add up over a period of anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 years. And not uncommonly, they expect that number to be much larger than the one that they put in, like any investor, and we need to be respectful of that. So again, the most important thing that we found, though, is a really connection between the mission, the values of our organization and the investment firm, and what is the long-term strategy. I can tell you from the number of groups we talk to, there's quite a bit of differentiation there, but there are a number of organizations that are really quite interested and have a similar mission in mind. So next slide, please. So this is just kind of a map of where we've been. As I mentioned to you, we were founded in 2014. We now have 73 employees. Our EBITDA is where it needs to be. We are privately owned. And I just, without putting numbers there, of course, this being in a public forum, I gave you a map of where we expect to be over the next number of years. So we have really, it's very exciting that we've experienced consistent growth year over year of over 45%. We expect to continue that. We have experienced some positive tailwinds because of COVID and the need to get clinicians into clinics in a very robust way. And I'm sure everybody on the screen is very cognizant of the significant increase in demand for mental health services. Next slide, please. So what are some of the investment highlights that we've experienced? And again, that I think investment partners would expect. Depending on the type of investment firm, it depends on the cadence of investment growth you want. Some like angel investors may invest a smaller amount of money, but they expect a much quicker return in a short period of time. Whereas there are firms that really are looking to be a consistent ongoing partner for quite a few years. Can we demonstrate a history of success when we meet with an investor? So you need to have a reference point that gives an investor confidence that they are going to place their money in a solid organization. That often comes with they want to know who the leadership team is and what their experience is. And then how can we streamline any operational issues to really, in a thoughtful and efficient way, reduce fixed overhead, which of course equates to the bottom line. And then what type of valuable partnerships do we already have in place? When we finally settled with the really outstanding group that we have with Canyon Health Partners, there were certain criteria that their leadership wanted us to have in place to finalize the investment. We were able to demonstrate that. And it's been, I have to say, a tremendous relationship going forward. We've learned a lot from each other. Next slide. So funding requirements. Again, I think I mentioned quite a bit of it. What does our leadership team look like? How can we demonstrate our efficiency and capability and expertise in the field? Most investment firms want to know who the leadership team is, what your connections are, and how can you do this? How can you build that company going forward? How do you bring on clinicians and hire them and retain them? And develop a strategy for rapid growth. So I have to say, in regards to how we work with our investment partners and board members, it's not dissimilar from the nonprofit world. The board members help us significantly with strategic planning and strategic growth. They expect and we are responsible for day-to-day operations. And we keep that boundary pretty clear for the most part. And I think that's, do I have one more slide? No. So I'm going to pass it to Lynn, who's going to give a great perspective on her organization.
Thank you so much, John. And I'll echo what John said as well. about open minds. I absolutely love these web forum series and feel honored to be invited. And we always look forward to the Q&A period, because that really is where we learn a lot as well with your tough and challenging questions. So please send them our way. As I was introduced earlier, I'm Lynn Mason, and I'll expand a little bit on my intro in that I am a reformed investment banker. So I was an investment banker at Morgan Stanley in New York for 6 years. It's where I started my career. 2 of those 6 years, I was in the private equity capital markets group. So I was on the other side of the house a number of years ago now. And then after business school is when I went into healthcare, and I've been in healthcare since 2006. And then I'll also share that since 2013, I've been an executive of some sort in a private equity backed company. So I will do my best to answer all of your questions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'll say the benefit of going second is that John has covered a lot of the really hard stuff. So to what John said, I will say yes, yes, and yes. And I'll try to cover some things that are in addition to what John said, and not be repetitive. He did such an amazing job. Next slide, I just want to talk a little bit at first about Broadstep. And I smile whenever I see this slide, because it makes me really proud of what the workforce, like our teammates, came together to do when we said, you know, it is time to rebrand this organization. If some of you are saying, I don't know Broadstep, you may know Phoenix Care Systems or Willow Glen or Bell Therapy, which were a number of the names that we operated under in the IDD and behavioral health world before we said, you know what, we need one name to unify them all. And we really involved our teammates and especially our direct service professionals to say, who are we and why are we here? And what was consistent across the group is, look, whether someone walks in our door for 5 minutes or for 50 years, we want this to be a place where everyone feels like they're at home. We're not there yet, we're building it. And so, when we think about our purpose for being here, we're building a place your heart can call home. And, our vision is to be first choice in what we do. And next slide. We'll accomplish that vision through our mission, and that's to be the best employer, the best provider, and the best community partner. And we think we'll get there if we do what we call ACE it with fun. So our values are accountability, compassion, excellence, integrity, teamwork, and fun. And we're quite serious about our fun because we all know in the spaces in which we operate in psychiatry and behavioral health and mental illness, and in these worlds, we're oftentimes a voice for those who can't be it for themselves. And it's not always fun, but if we're intentional about it, we can take something that's really, really hard and make it fun. And as we talk about private equity and going into that world, I do want you to keep fun in mind, because it's not always fun. And we'll talk about some of those things. Next slide. So yeah, I just want to very quickly introduce Broadstep, and please reach out. I love talking about our organization. We are in 6 states and growing. We're about 1,100 team members across these 6 states. And I started in September of 2019, and we were in 4 states and less than 900 teammates. And even with COVID putting a bit of a pause on some of our growth, we are aggressively expanding across the country. We take care of over 1,300 individuals, and we do it across a number of different programs. But I'd like for you to think of it in terms of with IDD and severe persistent mental illness, what are those pieces of the continuum of care that need to be filled in regarding residential and lifestyle, employment, growth type of services that need to be provided for these individuals. And that's where we seek to play. So we offer a number of different service programs, but it really is about creating a high quality of life that also coordinates the care that you need, and really says, you know, we can do a whole lot better here in the United States at bringing our folks, because these are our neighbors as well, into the community and creating the right kinds of homes for them. We also have our own pharmacy, which, and I'm biased, I come from a pharmacy background also, but I just think it's fantastic. Our psychiatrists and providers think it's fantastic that we partner our pharmacists and our providers very closely on medication adherence, the right prescriptions, med reconciliation. We service all of the states in which we're in. We can get the drugs very quickly to our individuals, especially as things change. So the pharmacy for us is something that we're really, really proud of. Next slide. So we are owned by the Bain Capital Double Impact Fund, and this is where I want to spend a bit more time. So Bain Capital, as many of you may know, is they're $120 billion shop. They cover a lot of assets under management, and I will just speak very bluntly. Whenever I think about a lot of the private equity shops, because I've been in a number of different companies that were private equity backed, I always tell my friends, whether that's someone who's going to go work at a private equity backed organization or is considering bringing in private equity dollars into their founded company investment, or going to work within a private equity shop, choose your private equity shop very, very wisely. John hit on this earlier, and I would love for everybody to replace private equity with partnership equity, because what you're looking for is a partner that has a unique set of skills and scale and access to resources, and they see the magic that your organization can bring to an industry, and they want to support you and partner with you in that. And they're going to challenge you and push you. You're going to challenge what they know and push them. And together, though, you think, hey, you bring that expertise, we'll bring our expertise and resources, and we're going to do something really special here. And if it doesn't feel like that in any way, shape, or form, it's not the right thing. John laid out great things to be thinking about, and you think through those things, and you get there and you say, still not feeling like a partnership. You can call me and yell at me later if you do this and it doesn't work out, but I say walk away and keep looking. What I really appreciate about Bain Capital is that you've got this behemoth of an organization, right? But they really bucket their investments into specified funds that have leaders in those funds who have a passion around what they're investing in. There's experts around those different industries, and these are investment professionals that have just done the type of investing they're doing over and over again. So for example, there's Bain Venture. They were one of the original investors, for example, in like Facebook. There's the kind of larger private equity fund. We're a part of Bain Capital Double Impact, and Double Impact was founded by Deval Patrick, and his idea was impact investing, whereas it was kind of seen as a fad, it's not going away. Those who truly want to make a difference, and they see their ability to make a difference being through the money that they can invest and offer, also want to see that they're doing something good, whatever it is that they're passionate about. And so Bain Capital, worked with Deval and some other founders that he brought alongside him to build this Double Impact Fund. They only invest in 3 different areas: health and wellness, that's what Broadstep falls under; sustainability, so think environment; education and workforce development, so think education and adult training and adult learning. And the idea is, if we can get healthcare right, if we can take care of the world in which we live in, and we can keep learning and growing from childhood into adulthood, we will have a positive impact on our world. And how that translates to us here at Broadstep is, we heard earlier about focusing on EBITDA, really making sure your financials, you're understanding what kind of returns you're looking for. You've been given these dollars, there's an expected return. Well, that's kind of how I was trained, right? I've been working in that since I was 21. So that part's like, cool, I know what to do. Let's, here's the formula. I've been working this formula for, 25 years. Let's just rock and roll. What is harder, but so much more fulfilling, is just as I have my financial dashboard, I have from the Double Impact Fund an impact dashboard. And every year we get together and we do the B Corp survey, and we see where there's gaps. And for us, I'm really excited about what I believe and know we can do for first our workforce, which is predominantly women, predominantly minorities, predominantly folks who live at the minimum wage line and don't have a 4-year degree or more. And the things that we can do to impact that population, to empower women, to empower minorities, to get funds to communities that don't typically get them, to improve education, improve access, is just phenomenal. And doing that through for-profit business is quite possible. And in this situation, and I'm held accountable to what are the metrics you're putting next to those things, Lynn, if that's what you really care about, and we all jointly care about. And we're going to measure on those metrics just like you're measured on your others. And I'll tell you, I just had to submit yesterday to the board of directors, and we'll talk about this in a moment, because it'll be really your PE shop. A lot of times it becomes the majority of your board of directors. My recommendations for bonuses, 2020 bonuses for our management team. Well, I know these guys, of course, are going to make their recommendation if I get a bonus or not, and what it is. And I'm sitting and looking at my outcomes, and I have just as many impact metrics that not only, I'm held accountable to in a quarterly meeting, it's where my compensation comes from. So, it's for us, it's very real. And I share all this about the Double Impact Fund to really get back to that point of choosing the partnership equity that's right for you. What has it brought for us to be a part of Bain Capital Double Impact? First, it's access that we otherwise, at our size and the industry that we're in, our purchasing power, volumes, those sorts of things, we otherwise wouldn't have had. Meaning within a year, we were able to implement ADP, TheraApp, new finance system. We rebranded the whole company. We redid and relaunched a whole new website. We moved our home office from Wisconsin to North Carolina. We fully automated our pharmacy and moved it to a much larger site. We got a completely new benefits plan for our workforce. And we completed 2 significant acquisitions. They were just us, little Broadstep, on our own, trying to do all those things, and getting the pricing that we were able to get for a number of these things. It wouldn't have happened. And our private equity showed up for us, very supportive and helpful, and just really big. When I think about some of the pricing we get, for example, it's not based on us. It's based on the size of the portfolio that we're a part of, because we're all getting that purchasing power. And for them to just, help us get through all of those things in a year is fantastic. The other thing that we get is the board of directors. So my board of directors right now, we just expanded to 1 more, but there are 2 of Bain's leaders. We've got an industry expert who has been a CEO and an owner in the space for 30 years. He's our executive chairman. And then we have, a physician who's phenomenal. He's a CEO himself of a healthcare company. And then we've got a new leader that's coming on that's both clinical and operational in nature, and will start with us in March. Where I find organizations, and then we'll get to nonprofits here in a moment, where I find organizations often start to feel overwhelmed by the private equity, is thinking about, oh man, now I'm owned by private equity. They control everything. They have the purse strings. And my board meetings are now all about surviving the day. I need to survive that 8 a.m. to noon board meeting. And then I'll take a breath and I'll just live to do it again. And when I've got to get back in front of them. And, I say, if you really have partnership equity, that board meeting is a time for you to put your board to work. These guys are smart, and I'm sorry, I use guys across men and women. So, these guys are smart. They have access. If they don't know the answer, I feel great about saying, hey, this is going on in New Jersey. I need someone who can get me to this person who can solve this problem. You guys certainly know someone, and it's like, okay, give us a day. This should be about a partnership, and a whole bunch of brains in that room are better than one. Really use your private equity as your partner, and bring them along for the ride. I would say that's part two. It's a lot of things that I and my team, we believe, oh, this is the right next strategic move. Bring the, it's not about asking for, may I do this? It's, hey guys, can we get on the phone and let's talk about what we're going to do next. And you bring them along for the ride and really use them. All of a sudden, that relationship changes. Regarding nonprofits, when I first joined in September of 2019, it was very clear. We talked about in the interview process. We will grow primarily through acquisition. And this will be a very aggressive acquisition strategy. Open Minds was extraordinarily helpful to us in who are the right states, what are the right things we should be looking at, et cetera. But, one of the things that was said to me over and over again was, X out all the nonprofits. So, we don't do nonprofits. And then here's your universe if you go through all of that. And I'll tell you, it was just not the right mindset for us to have in a number of ways. One, especially in this space, nonprofits have led the day. Nonprofits have really taken on the brunt of the work that government in a lot of ways just didn't quite know how to do. Legislators didn't know how to do. For-profit, a lot of times didn't see the money value in it. And the nonprofits came in and said, we got this. Now the world is changing. Different opportunities are opening up for nonprofits and for-profits. And I think we're all kind of saying, okay, wait, we're better together. Let's think about if we can bring all these resources together, what serving this population could really look like. I started seeing more and more of companies that I thought would benefit from being a part of the Broadstep family. We would definitely benefit from bringing them in. Were some nonprofits. So like I said, we just did two significant acquisitions. One closed 12/31, another closed January 14th. We'll have another that closes in February, and probably another that closes in March. The ones closing in February and March are all nonprofits. And we literally now have gone back to the drawing board, looked at the full landscape and said, wait, who are really those companies that the mission vision alignment is there? They get it, that they're a part of an impact fund. And with the right resources and access and operational prowess and that, that kind of mindset, we're going to be unstoppable. So I would say, for us, we had a change of heart. I love it. I'm so excited about these nonprofit acquisitions that are coming on, and private equity is having a big change of heart, which is great. The rest of the slides, I think they're, we don't have to go through. They're really about why private equity invested in the space, but I think, you know, John and Tom, it's probably better to get to questions on folks and what they're thinking about.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John and Lynn. That was super awesome. And I think it's really interesting. This is sort of like tale of two cities. You've got John that's worked his way up as a psychiatrist to run a large provider group, and Lynn, you know, from the investment banking side, now running a large provider group. So it's sort of tale of two cities. It's a really great opportunity for the audience, you know, to get some honest feedback and answers from. So got a bunch of questions, but also the audience, please chime in here if you have anything. Just getting back to John, you know, John, you and I first started talking about this at the met at Open Minds Performance Management Institute probably 2 winters ago, exactly, in Florida, sharing some war stories over dinner. But I know you've been working on it even prior to that. So can you go back in time and just talk about, like, what was your thought process? When did you realize that you needed to go after venture capital, and kind of what were you comparing that against?
Well, that's actually the key question. It actually ties into some of Lynn's comments, which I found fascinating to hear your story, Lynn. So yeah, as I mentioned, some colleagues and I started the business, we funded it, and you know, we were doing okay. We were growing each year, but relatively small. But you know, making a tiny margin, but realized fairly quickly that if we were going to continue to grow, and more importantly, if we were going to be competitive at all, there were some pretty big, well-known names nationally in telemedicine that you know, we just couldn't compete with, and real familiar names to everybody. So prior to leaving the nonprofit, the board there decided that they needed to grow too. So we did a merger with a very large health system, and I got to know a banker who invited me to come to New York City. And I have to say, it was like one of the sentinel experiences of my life. I'm sitting in the 29th floor of Rockefeller Center with investors wanting to talk to me, and I thought, what the hell do they want to know from me? And as we talked, it really reinforced your point, Lynn, clearly, that the fundamental provision of mental health care in this country for decades has been government-funded nonprofit. The private commercial payers wanted nothing to do with it, especially in your segment of IDD and serious mental illness. There was no commercial funding. So what we had to do as nonprofit providers with, you know, large numbers of very complex patients coming in our door is, how do we engage with these individuals? How do we really make them feel that that is their home, which I think you said perfectly? And how do we keep them in treatment out of the hospital? And over time, we had to learn how to do that. So what I learned in this new world is, we have all the expertise for sale, because really nobody else knows how to do that. The private psychiatric market was, you know, the traditional lay on a couch and kind of lament about your world. This work that you're doing, Lynn, and the mental health centers do, that's where the heavy lifting, meaningful work occurs. So real quick, maybe to make a little quicker, Tom, what I learned was we had that expertise, and in this new world, there was value to that. As integrated care becomes more meaningful, we're real fortunate to Patrick Kennedy's a partner of ours, and I was at a recent presentation with him, and he can be, like most of his family, pretty articulate when he gives a presentation. And he kind of led the audience along. He said, there's been a lot of medical research done on this, and he said, I want to let the audience know that the brain is actually attached to the rest of the body, and it has a meaningful impact there. And that's, I know it sounds like a joke, but in regards to funding, that was not really realized. And so the whole world of integrated care, Lynn, you mentioned that, the huge number of patients that access their mental health care through primary care physicians still needs to be addressed. So we're fortunate also that we connected with as Lynn put, a equity partner that really shared our vision and our mission, and that's helped immensely.
Don and Lynn, you already beat me half my questions here, so maybe I'll just iterate a little bit. But one of my burning questions was, are you a non-for-profits? And you talked about that a little bit. So I'll just flip that around. So for the nonprofits that are in today, what advice would you have to them for helping to get on this private radar and how to deal with them? Oh, you're on mute. I think you're on mute. I cannot hear you.
It's been a little slow to respond to coming off mute, to be fair. So.
Oh. Maybe try again.
Do you want me to fill in quickly while Lynn's working on that?
Yeah, Lynn, our question, John, while we're trying to get Lynn back. So Lynn, these impact performance measures that were put on her, which are different traditional kind of financial measures, but I'm sure the opposite was true for you, right? Your new investors are probably putting a lot of new measurements on you that you're not used to learning. So can you talk about that a little bit, what those were, and also maybe some of the governance behind that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're pretty traditional. I think I kind of mentioned them at in my new terms. It's really about strategic growth year over year. Again, another term that I needed to pay attention to, what wasn't used to, is gross margin and how that affects growth. So, I kept, why were you lamenting so much about gross margin when we're making a profit? So I've learned that. I've learned a number of other lessons, and they have been extremely patient with me. I can't believe it. But I also learned that, in the nonprofit world, and Lynn, I'd be interested in your perspective on this. We could stretch $1 because we had to. I mean, we made every spend count because if we could just get to a balance zero at the end of the year. And I realized after a number of board meetings that I started to get scolding as to why are you not spending this money? We don't expect you to sit on it, John. And that's just what I was used to. I wasn't going to spend any money unless they want that money put to work. And not just spent, but spent in a thoughtful, strategic, meaningful way. So that might have been one of the most important lessons learned early on from the way I used to manage an organization. And again, I understand it now, but so that was, I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, no. Super. Are you back, Lynn? Can we hear you?
Yeah, I am. I don't know. It would not come
sweet.
off mute.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's because John needed to share that with us first. And it's really the traditional metrics. And I think what I have found with the nonprofits that we've been engaging with, so very similar to what John just said. So it's just an education piece, and that's whether it's nonprofit, frankly, or for profit, where hey, your EBITDA matters, your margin matters. The stretching of the dollar, absolutely, and where I find working with the nonprofits is also super exciting is that nonprofit companies are like, great, you've got these national contracts that are going to reduce our food costs by how much, and it's good, whereas sometimes our for-profit folks who've been in it for a while are like, oh, you just are after me about my costs. It's like, no, they're important. But to that point, there's a couple areas that I would say, really to be mindful of, just in my experience, I've been finding. One is around the kind of overhead staffing kind of ratio, if you will. When we look at staffing ratio, of course, we look at the direct service and what's required, and do you have that? But we also look at overall organization. And interestingly enough, we always find this inflated kind of beyond the direct service professional level. And that's something to just be mindful of and look out. How many chiefs do I have walking around chiefing? and how is that impacting, frankly, the bottom line? The other pieces, and this will be the flip side, I think sometimes with the stretching of a dollar, which I love that mindset. But there are things that need to be done that get pushed off or don't get done or get patched up. And what I have found to be, at least for our space, front and center, are property and plant. And it is, you really can repaint and fix the sidewalk out front. You don't have to patch the driveway. Let's get a new driveway. And it's really, and what I find is, there's like this argument back of like, well, no, that costs this, and we'll just patch it up. And what I try to convey is, at the end of the day, here, what are we building? And if this were your home, what would you do? And I know I told you to have an EBITDA mindset and an exit multiple mindset. Frankly, which would you rather buy if you were coming in? Someone who's already been taking care of the property and plant, they've been keeping it look a certain way, that they're on top of it, or something that you're like, oh boy, let me hire a bunch of consultants to go in and just tell me how much we got to spend to update all of these things. And so, that's the other piece I would say, those things that you would step back and say, it really is time. Think of spending those dollars as an investment and what is actually going to net you a bigger multiple.
So let me just circle back to the question I think I was trying to ask before. And so for Lynn, I would say, you're on the acquirer side, right? So what advice would you have for those not-for-profit or otherwise that are trying to get on, or should be, or could be on the radar of those potential acquirers? And then I'll ask Sean, what advice would you have for those folks that are trying to get on the radar of these investors? Lynn first.
Yeah, I have found it's really about building relationships in your local markets with the for-profits through the organizations you all are already involved with, probably anyways, and being very upfront about we're considering selling. There's no one that has come and talked to us and said that where we've publicized it all over the place. And we've just not sat down and had a conversation. So I think there's value in putting it out there to those that you yourself see you could be a part of. Mm-hmm. So do the work first. Who's got that great reputation? Who could you see yourself either working with, or you'd feel really good that your legacy going forward, even if you go do something else, is with them? And ask for a conversation. And I would say those conversations typically take place, and that's why this is so painful. So I've met so many people at Open Minds conferences, they're at conferences, JP Morgan, where we're sitting and we're just talking. So that's one. Secondly, and I'm sure John will hit on this one as well, the small to middle market bankers that are local to your area, your state, or even the bigger ones, they're searching for organizations like yours to bring to organizations like a Bain Capital Double Impact or to a Broadstep. And it's very hard for them to find you. So, make yourself known to them. And how do you do that, Lynn? Honestly, a phone call, because they're searching for you and they would love a phone call. And then just lastly, we all share, and I just, kind of just said this at the first point, we all share a number of vendors in common. Talking to those vendors. So one of the acquisitions that we did came to us through TheraApp. It was a conversation with TheraApp that someone had a very trusted relationship and just said, I think it's time. And who do you think would make a good partner for us? And they were like, I think I know the people that you guys might like. And so, those trusted folks who see all of us can really help make those connections.
Anything to add to that, John?
Yeah, I think it is about the relationship most fundamentally. When we went on our search, we always said that the cultural match is more important than the money, because in the long term, you're kind of getting married for a few years, maybe longer. And so if you're not aligned in mission, I think it could be pretty unpleasant. We were fortunate that we found one, and actually the really exciting part is I'm aware now that there are actual funds being built right now as we speak, specifically focusing on behavioral health investment. Just one I can think of as impactful investment. They are focusing absolutely specifically on how can we do well and do good. So I think you made a good point, Lynn, that there are firms out there like the relationship we have with Bain in their segment that don't want to just invest for the, getting a benefit of a certain number at the end. They want to have a positive impact. And so there are actually funds out there like that. I probably get an unsolicited call a week, if not more, from a brilliant young entry-level person at a fund that's making their name, and their job is to go out and find somebody a good opportunity, because that's how they earn their credibility in the firm. So you're right, Lynn, just get your name out there. At this point, people will come searching for you, and to me that's unbelievably exciting in the behavioral health world.
So you both talked about this. I almost feel like it's eHarmony or Match.com or something about this matchmaking process, right? And so, I can envision like what you guys are looking for. I mean, you probably have a list, right? And like, it when you see it. What about turning that around? How are you preparing yourself for folks that are looking for you? Is that staffing, finance, business model? How do you best prepare yourself for the folks looking for you?
And you want to go first?
I'll start with John again. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, me?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Well,
how did you prepare your business so that it would be attractive to these investors?
Well, I think, most fundamentally, your financial deck is critical. You need to be able to demonstrate that you have a track record of performance. And I'll share at the end, and maybe Lynn can help, or you, Tom, with a question I still get confused about in this world. So that's the most fundamental. And then a management team that is tenured and skilled in the field is critical. Every time we've talked to someone, they say, I want to see your management team. I want to see their Vitas. I want to see what you're going to do. And then a strategic growth plan for the next 2 to 3 years. Based on your performance, where are you going to be at the end of 3 years? I've been asked for longer than that. I think it's actually delusional to think you can predict healthcare beyond 3 years. It might even be a little bit of a stretch there, but some people ask for that. But if I could turn around real quick, Tom, I have a question for you, because I'm still confused about this. I don't understand when we make a margin, bona fide, we bring in more money than we spend. And our gross margin isn't in the area where, say, the tech companies are. We're not 70% gross margin. But I see telemedicine companies out there that burn through cash every month. They haven't made a dime, and investors are throwing unbelievable numbers at them. And I can't scratch my head.
Yeah, Lynn, feel free to chime in, but it's about scale, right? So they're going after these ginormous markets, and what they're focused on primarily is customer acquisition. Once they have those customers, it could be hundreds of millions of users. Then they turn on the revenue model and start making some money. So they view it as every dollar of profit that is going to the bottom line right now is sort of a waste of money, because that's one more dollar that could have been used to acquire a new customer. So they want to get as many customers under that tent as they can. And we've seen this over and over again with the Amazons and the Facebook. Once they get those customers under the tent, then they turn it on, and they have huge margins because of the model. So it's very different than what, like I mentioned to you before. I was doing the year NPV cash flow analyses of some manufacturing plant when I did my MBA a million years ago. It's just not like this world now. And so unless Lynn has anything to chime in here, I think that's sort of my 2 cents.
Sounds like a game of potato, really.
So we're getting a little shorter on time, but let me, like, a little bit of a speed round here. Can folks name 3 pros of working with your investor and 3 cons? I'll start with Lynn.
Yeah, so the 3 pros are partnership help, access and scale, and support when we have gaps in what we're able to achieve. Cons, there's a lot of leadership cooks in the kitchen that need to be managed and convinced. Secondly, the pressure, whether said or unspoken, to deliver private equity type results that can result in some great exit versus a super long-term mindset. And I say third, it can be the lingering thought that perhaps you'll be sold, and what you love and enjoy doing and running, maybe that'll be an opportunity for you once you're sold, or maybe it won't be.
No, well said. Yeah, mine are
John, pros and cons.
Fairly similar. Pros are clearly opportunity for growth. The investment immeasurably enhances that. So you have resources and bandwidth to grow exponentially. Having a strategic partner that essentially knows a lot of areas of expertise that you may not have on board. So we have outstanding clinical expertise and workflow, but our investors and board members that represent those investors have brought great strategic insights to us. And then just business acumen, at least from my perspective, it's, again, as I mentioned, a whole different world. So it's been extremely valuable. We haven't experienced too many cons, but I think Lynn, I often use too many spoons in the soup. We've had some good discussions, and we have a real good, I would say, boundary between strategic discussions and management of the company. And it's our job to manage day to day. Their job and their help with us to strategic growth. And so I think we found a good cadence there. Loss of control is always a concern. We haven't experienced that, but I think that's a genuine concern with any investment partner. And then you're right, Lynn, I think the eventual, at some point, whether it's soon or later, any investor is going to want a transaction. That's the only reason they're here. I was at a really good presentation at one of the national healthcare conferences, and there was a colleague of mine that was the founder of an electronic health record and his investment partner from one of the big firms. And they asked the young man from the investment group, well, what do you want out of this? And he said, it's real simple. I gave him a pile of money like this, and I want him to look like this. He said, that's it.
So I just really, on behalf of myself and Open Minds, just really want to thank both of you. I know you're extremely busy with your job, so it's very generous of you to come on and spend this time with us, and we really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy for some last minute wrap up.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I felt like I was sitting at a coffee shop having a conversation with you guys. Really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. It's definitely a new topic for me. Thank you all for your investment. And for those who are on the line, I know we've got a few remaining. We just want to talk about two things really quickly before we sign off today. If you enjoyed what you experienced today, we have a lot more of sessions like this on a host of topics coming up at the Performance Management Institute. Everything will be virtual. So if you want, you can experience lots of great sessions, webinar modality delivered, so to speak. Information's here on the slide in front of you, and please consider that. And the next slide, we're going to talk about next week's Executive Web Forum, and of course, that is with our very own Ken Carr, an in-house senior associate, talking about how to demonstrate the ROI of a new clinical program, right? Let's learn those fundamentals of service line development and return on investment. So that'll be right here a week from now, 1 o'clock, same time. To register either for the Institutes or for our Executive Web Forum series, all of that is on our website, of course, at openminds.com. Just go to events and you will easily be able to navigate from there. So again, Tom, John, Lynn, thank you for your time. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. And if you're watching this on demand, hope you're having a wonderful day as well whenever you are viewing this presentation. And thanks again. We hope to see you next week. Corey, thanks for producing behind the scenes. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.